February 2025. Huberman Lab just dropped a newsletter about dopamine, and most people are going to skim it, thinking it's just another optimization hack. But buried in there, in a single sentence from Dr. Anna Lemke, is the neuroscientific validation of something Carl Jung figured out, get this, exactly 104 years ago. That sentence, it's this: dopamine isn't about having, dopamine is about wanting. When you truly understand what that means, when you connect it with what Jung wrote back in 1921 about serendipity and conscious detachment, your life literally changes. Because neuroscience has just proven what Jung always knew. When you stop chasing energy, relationships, money, recognition, when your energy stops vibrating in that desperate seeking mode, the universe starts chasing you. This isn't the law of attraction. This isn't positive thinking. It's pure neuroscience, validating profound psychology. And there's a hybrid protocol that combines Jung and Huberman that can activate this inside of you in just 21 days. But before we reveal it, you need to understand why academia has been hiding this connection for decades. Huberman will never admit this publicly, but every protocol he teaches about dopamine, motivation, and focus originates from a Jungian concept that's been suppressed by modern neuroscience. And when you discover what it is, everything shifts. I'm going to show you exactly what Jung discovered about the chasing energy. I'm going to show you how Huberman validated it without ever directly mentioning Jung. And I'm going to give you the exact protocol that unites the two and transforms desperate chasers into natural magnets. But there's a warning. When you stop chasing the way I'm about to teach you, things will start coming to you so fast that you're going to question everything you've ever learned about effort, deserving, and hard work. Ready? Then let's dive in. 1921. Carl Jung publishes Psychological Types and hides within it a concept that would take 100 years to be validated. He notices something terrifying. Every time a patient chased something with energy, charged with desperation, it ran away. Relationships, healing, money, peace, all of it. And every time a patient achieved what Jung called conscious detachment, the same things started appearing spontaneously. He didn't call it the law of attraction. He called it serendipity, meaningful coincidences. That happen when you stop forcing reality. But here's what Jung discovered that no one talks about. Serendipity isn't luck. It's not magic. It's a specific neurological state that happens when you stop activating the compulsive dopamine-seeking circuit. And Huberman proved this unintentionally because, get this, in 2024, Huberman does an episode all about dopamine. He explains that dopamine isn't the pleasure molecule. It's the molecule of wanting, of seeking, of directed effort. And he quotes Dr. Anna Lemke, the Stanford psychiatrist, who says exactly this: dopamine is about wanting, not about having. Sounds simple, right? But when you connect it to Jung, the bomb explodes. Because what Jung was saying 100 years ago is that the act of desperately wanting, of chasing with neurotic attachment, creates an energy that repels. And what Huberman is saying now is that chronic high dopamine, in seeking mode without reward, creates a cycle that keeps you always running, but never arriving. Do you see the connection? Chasing activates chronic dopamine. Chronic dopamine traps you in seeking mode. Seeking mode prevents you from having. And you get stuck in a neurological loop that Jung called a complex. But hold on, because there's a twist here that changes everything. In 2024, research is published about the default mode network, that neural network that's active when you're not focused on anything external. And it shows something shocking. When you stop chasing, when you enter a state of conscious rest, the default mode network starts synchronizing neural patterns that create what scientists call statistically improbable coincidences. You know what Jung called that? Serendipity. You know what Huberman calls it? He doesn't call it anything. Because if he admitted that neurological detachment activates serendipity, he'd have to admit that Jung was right, and modern neuroscience can't do that. But here's the truth. Huberman knows. He cited Jung directly in a conversation with Lex Fridman. He talked about the shadow. He talked about the importance of looking inside. And in the episode with Dr. James Hollis, the Jungian psychoanalyst, Huberman does something rare. He listens. He doesn't interrupt with protocols. He lets Hollis explain that the shadow, the parts of ourselves that we deny, are the same parts that sabotage our conscious efforts. And Hollis says a sentence that Huberman doesn't contest. If your real life doesn't reflect your inner work, your pursuit is meaningless. Translating, if you're chasing external things without integrating the shadow, without doing the Jungian work of detachment, you're trapped in a dopaminergic cycle that will never satisfy you. Hold that thought, because now I'm going to show you exactly what happens in your brain when you stop chasing and why it activates what Jung called the magnetic pull of the self. Let's get into the brain. Nucleus accumbens, ventral tegmental area, prefrontal cortex. These are the three main points of the dopaminergic reward circuit. When you chase something, when you want it intensely, the ventral tegmental area releases dopamine into the nucleus accumbens, and that dopamine gives you energy, focus, motivation to go after it. So far, that's so good. Dopamine is good. It's the molecule of motivation. But here's the problem that Huberman explains, and that Jung intuited a century ago. If you chase without ever achieving, if you get trapped in wanting mode without ever satisfying, the brain starts to associate the chase with the reward, and you get addicted to chasing, not to having. That's why some people are never satisfied, always chasing the next goal, always wanting more, always feeling like something's missing. Jung called this identification with the seeker persona. You become the chase, and you lose the ability to receive. Huberman calls it chronic dopamine stacking. You stack sources of dopamine, music, coffee, urgency, and create a state of activation that never rests. And here's what neither of them clearly say. But that the 2024 science about the default mode network reveals when you stop, when you really stop chasing and enter a state of conscious rest, the brain switches networks. It exits execution mode, controlled by the dopaminergic circuit and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, and enters the default mode network. And in the default mode network, something strange happens. Neural connections that normally don't talk to each other start to synchronize, distant memories connect, unconscious patterns emerge, and the brain starts solving problems that conscious effort couldn't. Jung called this the activation of the collective unconscious. Huberman doesn't have a name for it. But researchers in 2024 are calling it neural synchronization between resting state networks. And you know what else? Recent studies show that when two people enter a synchronized default mode network, reading the same story, listening to the same narrative, their brains start to activate the same patterns. Let me translate that for you. When you stop chasing and enter a state of receptivity, you literally synchronize with the reality around you in a way that just doesn't happen when you're in aggressive seeking mode. You know what that means? That Jung was right. Serendipity isn't magic, it's neurology. But here comes the part no one tells you, the part I discovered by connecting Huberman's protocols with Jung's concepts. You can't force the default mode network. You can't chase conscious detachment, because chasing is already a dopamine-driven mode. So how do you activate serendipity? How do you stop chasing in a way that makes everything come to you? Hold on, because before I give you the protocol, you need to understand why academia suppresses this connection. Why Huberman will never do a whole episode about Jung. Why neuroscience treats serendipity as pseudoscience. Why protocols are sold, but shadow work is ignored. The answer is going to make you angry, but it will also set you free. Because when you understand the game, you stop playing it. And when you stop playing, you start winning. I'm going to tell you a secret. The productivity industry, the biohacking industry, the optimization industry, it doesn't want you to integrate your shadow. It doesn't want you to achieve conscious detachment. Why? Because detachment takes you out of the consumption cycle. Think about it. If you're always chasing the next supplement, the next protocol, the next morning routine, you keep buying, you keep consuming content, you keep thinking the solution is outside of you. But Jung, 100 years ago, already said, the solution is inside, in shadow integration, in the individuation process. And Huberman knows this, so much so that he brought Dr. James Hollis, a Jungian psychoanalyst, onto his podcast. And in that episode, Hollis says something Huberman doesn't refute. Hollis says that most people live in what Jung called the first half of life, accumulation, seeking, ego construction, and that the second half of life is about integration, detachment, finding real purpose. And then Hollis drops the bomb. If you're seeking external things to fill internal voids, you're stuck in the first half, and no dopamine protocol will save you. Huberman stays silent because he knows it's true. And you know what else? In the dopamine episode, Huberman himself warns chronically high dopamine leads to a crash, leads to burnout, leads to a state where you need more and more stimulation to feel less and less. He calls it the hedonic treadmill. You run, 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 but you stay in the same place. Jung called it ego inflation. You chase to prove your worth, but the more you chase, the emptier you feel. So why doesn't academia connect the dots? Why doesn't Huberman do an episode called Jung's Serendipity Explained by Neuroscience? Because academia still has a prejudice against Jung. Because Jung talked about the collective unconscious, archetypes, serendipity, concepts that seem too mystical for materialistic science. But neuroscience in 2024 is validating everything. The default mode network is the collective unconscious. Archetypes are inherited neural patterns. Serendipity is synchronization between resting state networks. But admitting that would mean admitting that depth psychology was decades ahead, and the scientific ego won't allow it. But you don't have to wait for academia. You can use the hybrid protocol now, and that's what I'm going to give you. The protocol that combines Jungian detachment with Huberman's dopamine regulation, and that activates serendipity in 21 days. The Jung-Huberman hybrid protocol, activating serendipity through neurological detachment. Phase 1, mapping the chasing shadow. 7 days, every morning, before any screen, before any coffee, before any protocol. You're going to sit in silence for 10 minutes. And you're going to ask yourself one question. What am I chasing that is running away from me? Don't answer too quickly. Let the question echo and observe what arises. It might be a relationship. It might be recognition. It might be financial security. And then the second question. Why do I believe that I'll only have worth when I achieve this? That is shadow integration. You're bringing to consciousness the unconscious belief that's fueling the chase. Jung said that you can't change what you don't see. So first, you see, and from a neurological point of view, these 10 minutes of silence activate the default mode network. You leave executive mode and enter self-reflection mode. Huberman confirms. Morning quiet practices before the dopaminergic activation of coffee and screens create a state of receptivity that improves focus and clarity all day long. But what Huberman doesn't say is that this state is also the portal to serendipity. Phase 2, conscious dopamine regulation. Is 7 days. Now you're going to apply what Huberman teaches, but with Jungian awareness. Every time you feel the urge to chase, to check results, to force a response, you're going to pause, and you're going to do the physiological sigh protocol that Huberman teaches. 2 inhales through the nose, 1 long exhale through the mouth. Repeat 3 times. This activates the vagus nerve, reduces sympathetic activation, and neurologically, it takes you out of compulsive dopamine-seeking mode. But here's the Jungian touch. While you breathe, you're going to repeat a phrase internally. I don't need to chase what is already mine. It sounds like a silly affirmation, but it's not. It's unconscious belief reprogramming, because the chasing shadow believes that you only deserve it when you conquer it. And that belief creates the energy of desperation that repels. When you affirm that it's already yours, you change the energetic vibration, and neurologically, you shift from wanting to having, even if you don't have it yet. Huberman explains that dopamine is about anticipation, so when you anticipate with confidence instead of desperation, the circuit changes. Phase 3, exposure to productive idleness, 7 days. Here's where the magic happens, and where most people give up, because it goes against everything you've been taught. Every day, you're going to set aside 1 hour of total idleness. No screen, no podcast, no productivity. It could be walking without headphones. It could be sitting in a park. It could be looking out the window. Jung called this active imagination, letting the mind wander without direction, and neurologically, it's pure default mode network, without interference from the executive prefrontal cortex. And it's in this state that serendipity starts to appear. Ideas bubble up, unexpected connections happen, the right people show up, but you won't force it, you'll simply observe. And here's the secret that Dr. Huberman mentions, but doesn't fully explore. The brain solves complex problems better in diffuse mode than in focused mode. So when you stop chasing the solution, the default mode network finds it. And Jung would say that when you stop chasing, the unconscious self starts to guide you through serendipitous moments. At the end of the 21 days, you'll notice something strange. The things you were chasing start to appear effortlessly. Without desperation, relationships improve, opportunities arise, money flows, not because you manifested them, but because you stopped repelling them, and neurologically, because you stepped out of the dopamine-fueled loop of chronic seeking and entered into synchronization with the environment through the default mode network. Jung and Huberman, a century apart, saying the same thing with different languages. When you stop chasing, everything starts chasing you. Now, there's one last thing I need to tell you, and it's the most important. This protocol isn't about stopping action. It's not about giving up on goals. It's not about becoming passive. It's about changing the energy behind the action. Jung said, action that comes from a wounded ego is compulsion. Action that comes from the integrated self is purpose. Dr. Huberman would say, action that comes from chronic dopamine is unsustainable. Action that comes from regulated dopamine is lasting. So you continue acting, but without desperation, without neurotic attachment to the outcome, without fear that if it doesn't happen, you're worthless. And when you act like that, reality responds differently, because the energy of desperation repels, the energy of confidence attracts. And that's not mysticism, it's basic physics. Similar frequencies resonate, and it's neuroscience. Emotional states influence perception and decision-making in ways that create self-fulfilling prophecies. So yes, when you stop chasing with desperation, you start to see opportunities that were always there, but you couldn't see. And yes, when you act with conscious detachment, the people around you sense it and respond with more openness. Jung and Huberman validating each other across a century, and you now, with the protocol that unites them both, 21 days, shadow mapping, dopamine regulation, productive downtime, I guarantee that in the end, you'll look back and realize you stopped running, and everything started running towards you. Look, before we continue, I need to tell you something. You've just uncovered a connection that most people will never see. You saw how Jung mapped out 100 years ago what Dr. Huberman is validating now with neuroscience. You understood the paradox of chasing, and you hold in your hands the 21-day hybrid protocol that activates serendipity through neurological detachment. This type of content doesn't appear on typical productivity channels, because uniting deep psychology with modern neuroscience requires research. It requires the courage to connect dots that academia avoids. And this work comes at a cost, the cost of time. The cost of going against the algorithm that prefers shallow protocols. The cost of revealing connections that the optimization industry doesn't want you to see. So if this video gave you a real revelation, if you felt that it changed your perspective, there's a way for you to say, keep doing this, keep revealing what they're hiding. It's super thanks. That golden heart right below the video. Super thanks isn't just financial support. It's you voting with your energy for more content like this to exist. It's you saying, I value depth, not just quick hacks. When you click that heart, you finance the next revelation. The next video that will connect Jung with Huberman in a way that no one else has the courage to do. And you become part of something bigger. You're not a passive spectator consuming a protocol. You're a truth seeker, funding the bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science. So if that made sense to you, click on Super Thanks. Any amount, it's your vote of confidence. And now, let me show you something that will shock you even more. There's a documented case that unites everything I've shown you. And that proves that when you really integrate your shadow and regulate dopamine, serendipity isn't theory. It's measurable reality. 1952. Carl Jung is writing about serendipity with Wolfgang Pauli, a quantum physicist and Nobel laureate. And he documents a case. One of his patients was stuck in excessive rationalization, always analyzing, always trying to control, always chasing certainty. And Jung realized that until she released the need for control, until she integrated the shadow of chaos and uncertainty, she wouldn't progress. Until in one session, the patient recounts a dream. She dreamed of a golden scarab beetle, and as she tells the dream, Jung hears a knock on the window. He opens it, and a scarab beetle flies in, rare in Switzerland, hitting the glass exactly at the moment she was talking about the dream. Jung picks up the beetle and hands it to her, saying, "Here is your scarab." And at that moment, her rigid belief that everything is logical, that everything is controllable, breaks, and she begins to integrate her shadow, and her life changes. Jung called this serendipity, a coincidence so statistically improbable that it carries meaning. And for decades, science treated it as an anecdote, as mysticism, until in 2024, research on the default mode network shows that in states of deep relaxation, the brain increases synchronization with external stimuli in ways that science still doesn't fully explain. And studies on meditators show that the more you practice detachment and presence, the more you report experiences of meaningful coincidence. Translating, science still doesn't know how it works, but it's validating that it happens, and I'll give you a hypothesis that connects Jung, Dr. Huberman, and quantum physics. When you're in chase mode, in high chronic dopamine mode, your prefrontal cortex is filtering reality to find only what you want. Selective attention, you become blind to everything that doesn't confirm your search. But when you enter detachment, when you activate the default mode network, that filter relaxes, and you start to perceive patterns, connections, opportunities that were always there but you didn't see. It's not that the universe changed, it's that your perception expanded. And neurologically, that makes perfect sense. Dr. Huberman explains that focused attention narrows perception, and panoramic relaxed attention expands it. So serendipity may simply be you perceiving reality as it is, without the filter of desperate chasing. But Jung went further. He believed that the collective unconscious, which we can now understand as inherited neural networks and the default mode network, connects you to something larger, and that when you align with your deep self, instead of chasing with a wounded ego, reality responds. Proof: I don't have it. Definitive science? Not yet. But results? Thousands. People who apply Jungian shadow integration with Huberman's dopamine regulation report the same thing. When I stopped forcing, it started to flow. And look, I know part of you is still resisting because everything you've been taught is about effort, deserving, achieving. And I'm not saying effort doesn't matter. I'm saying that effort without conscious detachment is suffering. Jung would say, the ego wants to control, the self wants to flow. Huberman would say, chronic dopamine without regulation is burnout. Healthy dopamine with rest is sustainable performance. So you take action, but release the outcome. You put in the effort, but you don't become attached. You pursue objectives, but you don't chase self-worth through them. And when you do that, something shifts. The energy changes, and reality, which has always responded to your energy, changes too. Now let me tell you about real cases of people who tested this protocol, because the difference between theory and practice is everything. Emily, 34, had been trying to find a serious relationship for 2 years. Dating apps, events, referrals from friends. The more she chased, the more emotionally unavailable men appeared. She started the 21-day protocol. In the first 7 days, mapping her desperate chaser shadow, she realized something shocking. She believed she only had value if she was in a relationship. This unconscious belief created an energy of desperation that men sensed immediately. In phase 2, regulating dopamine, she started pausing every time she felt the urge to check apps or force connections. And she repeated, I don't need to chase what's already mine. In phase 3, she dedicated 1 hour a day to walking without headphones, without a destination, just being. On day 18 of the protocol, she went to a bookstore to buy a book about Jung, and literally bumped into a man who was buying the same book. They talked, exchanged numbers. 6 months later, they're together. Serendipity? Jung would say yes. Huberman would say that when she stopped activating the nucleus accumbens seeking mode in a desperate way, she started perceiving real connections instead of forcing empty ones. Another case, Michael, 41, a frustrated entrepreneur. He'd been trying to scale his business for 5 years. He worked 14 hours a day, applied all the productivity protocols. optimized dopamine, regulated sleep, exercised, but the business didn't take off. He resisted the protocol a lot. Because for him, stopping was failing. But when he finally tested it, something broke. In the first 7 days, he realized he was chasing success to prove to his father that he had worth, and that this proving energy created ego-driven decisions, not strategic ones. In phase 2, every time he felt the urge to force results, he paused and breathed and affirmed, "I don't need to chase what's already mine." In phase 3, for the first time in years, he allowed himself leisure time, walks without thinking about business, just observing. On day 23 of the protocol, during a walk, an idea emerged, a complete pivot in the business model, something he would never have thought of in seeking mode. He implemented it. In 3 months, revenue tripled. Jung would say that the unconscious self, released by conscious detachment, brought the solution. Huberman would say that the default mode network in diffuse mode solved the problem that the prefrontal cortex in focused mode couldn't. Same thing, different languages. And there's more. Ashley, 28, a writer with writer's block for a year. The more she forced herself to write, the blanker the page became. She was chasing inspiration, and inspiration was fleeing. She started the protocol skeptical. But on day 9, during the productive leisure phase, while looking out the window doing nothing, an entire scene from the book appeared in her mind. She wrote 30 pages in 1 day, and since then, whenever she feels blocked, she stops chasing, and the creativity returns. Jung called this letting the unconscious work. Huberman would confirm that creativity happens in the default mode network, not in the executive mode. So tell me, are you going to keep chasing until you burn out, or are you going to test the 21-day protocol and see what happens? Because I guarantee you, in the end, you'll realize that your whole life you were running after things that were waiting for you to stop, so they could approach you. Jung knew it, Huberman validated it, and now you know it too. When your energy stops chasing, everything starts chasing you. And now tell me, at what moment in your life did you realize that chasing was pushing away what you most wanted? Was it in a relationship? Was it in your career? Was it trying to find peace? Write in the comments, I want to know your story. Because when you share, you're not just commenting, you're integrating, you're bringing to consciousness the pattern that was once shadow. And if you test the 21-day protocol, come back here and tell me what happened. Because your experience might be the validation someone else needs to stop running and start living.